Welcome to Roundhouse Roulette, a Walker, Texas Ranger podcast. Normally, we'd be recapping and reviewing a bone-crushing episode of Walker, Texas Ranger, but in celebration of Chuck Norris's 81st birthday, we thought we'd dive deep into the storied catalog of epic Chuck Norris films. I'm Evan Dalton, here with my brother Adam.
What up, what up?
And a man whose Subaru was once tailgated by a Dodge Ram Charger, Mr. Bob Leahy.
Vroom, vroom, baby.
Well, thanks to everyone for joining us as we rate and recap Chuck Norris's first role as a Texas Ranger, the 1983 blockbuster Lone Wolf McQuade. But before we douse ourselves in Pearl Lager and flip the supercharger switch on this podcast, join us as we pull up a stool at our favorite establishment, CD's Bar and Grill. Fancy meeting you guys. What's going on? This is such a great bar.
Yeah, it is. In CD, he's got a lot of beers on tap, a lot of local stuff. He likes to keep it fresh, you know.
We'd like to thank those of you who've purchased Roundhouse Roulette t-shirts this past week. In case you didn't know, for the month of March, we'll actually be donating all the proceeds of our t-shirts to help out with the Texas recovery efforts. Help us do some good if you can and get on over and get yourself a Roundhouse Roulette shirt. After all, we wouldn't have a podcast if it wasn't for Texas.
Damn straight.
So this week, CD's is dishing out a Bridgewater Blonde. It's an ale by Black Hat Brew Works in Bridgewater, Massachusetts. And as the bar and grill draft menu states, Bridgewater Blonde is an easy-drinking blonde ale with a nice sweet and light malty backbone. Truly a beer anyone can enjoy, especially someone who thinks craft beer is not for them. Let's give this thing a shot.
I'll just take a Bud Light, kid. It's good. I dig it.
Nice.
We think the CD's shipping company might have damaged these.
Bob's looks pretty... Actually, yours looks pretty frothy. Mine is devoid of any suds.
Let me see yours again. Just nothing at all. Oh, wow. You know what I got today? A Soda Stream.
Dude.
So, you think maybe... I mean, I don't think mine needs it, but if you guys have one, I don't think it would ruin your Soda Stream if you put it into the flat
Soda
beer.
Stream of beer.
What is it? You have like a carbonated thing? It adds carbonation to like sugar?
To water. Yeah, just to
it's
water.
like make your own seltzer.
Where did you get that?
The internet, man.
It's 2021, dude.
But yeah, this is a chill beer. I dig it.
So this is brewed in Bridgewater, Massachusetts, and they actually use local water from a spring up the street called Simpson Spring. And that's in Easton, Massachusetts. I used to live basically right next to Simpson Spring, so it made me feel good knowing that the groundwater was being depleted by a company bottling the water and selling it. Kind of like Chuck Norris's Seaforce water. Well, you know, I've been brewing up some cider, homebrewing some cider. One of these days, if I ever try homebrewing a beer, I'm only going to use Seaforce water.
You should definitely. That'd be totally worth it.
It'd be the only beer made with Seaforce, I would have to think.
Oh my god, that'd be awesome. That'd be expensive, but it would be just for the novelty, totally worth it.
Well, I mean, I think the Soda Stream machine, it's interesting that Adam has not heard of this before, but something like a Soda Stream machine is like, it's one of those things that in an 80s film that's supposed to take place in like a dystopian future or something like that, a Soda Stream would exist and no one would think twice about it. But in the movie, like if people are watching the movie, they'd be like, oh, that's cool. They can make their own soda.
Well, let's put these glasses up for our man Chuck Norris and wish him a happy 81st birthday. And Chuck, thank you for all the entertainment and allowing us to get together and savor Walker, Texas Ranger every week.
Here, here.
Clink.
Salute.
That in mind, this opens up the floor to the wonder that is the 80s action movie.
So in preparation for this, you know, I didn't really know a lot about David Carradine. And I was like, you know what? This week I'm just going to rewatch a bunch of stuff. So I rewatched Kill Bill 1 and 2 first. And I mean, those movies really distill a lot of the 70s kung fu frenzy and almost a lot of Western tropes too, which we see in this movie, Lone Wolf McQuade. And then also I was like, well, David Carradine, does he know karate? I mean, what's the deal with that? And just looking into it, he doesn't know karate at all. He was cast in the TV show Kung Fu from 1972, which was originally intended for Bruce Lee, but it looks like they might not have cast him due to race issues and whatnot, and it went to David Carradine. But Bruce Lee, I guess, was involved in writing a lot of the skeleton for the show Kung Fu, but didn't get any royalties from it or whatnot. They kind of stole it out from under him, and David Carradine was the recipient of that fortune. But I watched the pilot episode for that. I had to buy it. They don't have it streaming anywhere for free, but it was more Western. It took place in American Wild West, and he came over from China after studying with a monk and essentially accidentally killed somebody. And I guess every episode is him avoiding people who are after him and moving across the American West. So it was essentially a Western movie with tinges of Kung Fu. So essentially David Carradine, he doesn't know karate, but he got handed this TV show where for 3 seasons, he became the de facto Kung Fu guy, okay?
All right.
Yeah, pretty much.
On TV. Now, Chuck Norris at this time, right? He had actually won karate competitions. He picked up his version of karate when he was in Korea. I think, was it with the Air Force?
Yeah.
So he studied there and brought it back to the United States with him and started up his own dojos. And he realized that, you know, in order for him to grow, he would have to get more students. And thus, he entered all these competitions. Around the late 60s, he was competing and won a ton of major awards doing actual karate.
In the process, he got his front teeth kicked out and his jaw broken, which might explain a lack of some range in his acting. I'm not sure.
Dude, it's his birthday, man. You can't say stuff like that.
I'm giving him an out.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a gift.
It is a gift.
Well, yeah, so at the same time that the TV show Kung Fu is premiering with David Carradine, Chuck Norris appears in The Way of the Dragon facing off against Bruce Lee. And that sets up Chuck Norris to be a movie star. But he's not on your TV every day, you know what I mean? He's not constantly being shown as a Kung Fu master. And that's what's setting up Carradine as the ambassador of Kung Fu, even though he doesn't even know karate like Chuck Norris does. So I think this juxtaposition kind of sets them up to not really see eye to eye when they are working together on set for this movie, Lone Wolf McQuade. Have you ever seen this magazine before? It's called The Deadly Hands of Kung Fu.
No.
I got some stills of it here.
When would we ever have seen this?
Yeah.
I never heard of it until I was cruising the internet for Chuck Norris. But look, do you see the one with Chuck Norris on it? Isn't that ridiculous?
Yeah.
He's wearing super tight jeans and no shirt. And
Yeah, it's a large format
high-kicking
magazine called The Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. Stanley Presents. So it's a subsidiary of Marvel Comics. And they were capitalizing on the Kung Fu craze of the 70s. And issue number 4 has David Carradine, TV's master of Kung Fu, on the front cover illustrated. But you have to wait another 16 issues until they get to Chuck Norris, because his career was still on the rise, whereas David Carradine was establishing himself as the master of Kung Fu.
even though he has no idea what he's actually doing.
Exactly.
Yeah, sounds like a fraud to me.
I started reading the interview with Chuck Norris, and he talks about building up his dojos and his network. It was actually kind of, I'm not going to lie, it was a little boring because it sounded like he was just talking about the business of building up dojos as opposed to karate. But we'll put this article up on our Patreon so you can read the full, I think it's 1975 interview with Chuck Norris in The Deadly Hands of Kung Fu magazine.
It's a real nail biter. 80s action films are like one of my favorite movie genres because it's like a mashup of so many things. It's like a whole bunch of new techniques in filmmaking that people were trying out. Like it's the dawn of like computer generated stuff. So it's super cheese. And also like they were just looking for dudes that were like enormous, and they weren't really looking for anyone who could act. So this is where like Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Jean-Claude Van Damme, all these guys were just brought in because either they were gigantic or they could do crazy karate stuff, because stunts were still very much a huge part of these things. And that's really where Chuck Norris came in here. And like the early 80s was Chuck Norris time, prime time for action films. And it was basically like one a year in the early 80s at least. With him. So like 1980 he did The Octagon. 1981 he did An Eye for an Eye. What else? I think that was it there.
And The Eye for an Eye is directed by the same director who did this movie, the director Steve Carver. There's a great interview with him on YouTube that we'll post up on this episode page for this podcast, and he talks about working with Chuck and David, specifically the fight scene, which we'll dig into here. But usually you choreograph those type of fight scenes, but for whatever reason they just didn't get along on set, and he'd yell cut and they wouldn't talk to each other. Usually actors would be working out, oh, well, let's try this on the next take, that kind of thing. And then when he had the camera rolling, they would just fight each other, and they actually did the fight themselves. So it's almost kind of like, they're like, hey man, like a pissing contest for white kung fu.
Yeah.
It was kind of interesting listening to him talk about that. He also gets into some of the music, which I'm sure we'll get into, but yeah, definitely check it out. We'll put it up on our episode page here.
Yeah, long story short, they were kind of just trying to bring in either giant dudes or people with cachet. And so this film has Chuck Norris, who's really hitting his stride as an action movie star because of his his kicking ability, among other things. Then it's also bringing in David Carradine, who has instant familiarity as the Kung Fu master. So a little bit of all of that, and put it in with the promise of explosions, and hope it brings in some money.
Yeah, totally. And Evan, you and I were talking the other day, and we realized that the CW is also rebooting the TV show Kung Fu.
Yep, why not?
And it's coming out in the spring of 2021 here. But also, I mean, we were saying, like, that might be the reason why the reboot of Walker doesn't have any karate. I mean, they don't want to compete with their own show.
Yeah. Or this Kung Fu show won't have any karate either. It'll be like a teen drama.
Just long conversations. Well, we're here to talk about Chuck Norris's Lone Wolf McQuade. And if you out there have not seen the movie and are interested in watching it before we spoil it, it's available for free streaming on YouTube, Pluto TV, and Tubi.
Or you can go buy it on VHS like a real fan.
That would be the true way to watch it.
Absolutely. When we come back, we'll dig into our recap of Lone Wolf McQuade. If you're watching along at home and don't want any spoilers, hit the pause button, watch that movie, and kindly come on back to us. Welcome back. Let's dig into this one. The film was originally released on April 15th, 1983, and has an MPAA rating. Did you guys look? I wanted you guys to guess what the rating for this film is.
PG.
Well, I looked it up. The movie poster says it's rated R.
What?
I'll leave it at that.
Bob is right in that, unlike the movie poster, what I watched was PG.
Yeah, and some of those old movies, like, they were surprisingly rated, like, lower than you'd expect to. I know I've seen movies that were rated, like, PG, and I'd be like, whoa, I wouldn't show this to kids.
Right. Yeah, this one has a lot of murder, mayhem, explosions, and guns, so I wouldn't necessarily call this a PG film.
Well, apparently, okay. Now, this is a Chuck Norris joke in the making.
Adam, armchair expert here.
The film was originally rated R in the U.S., but somehow managed to obtain a PG rating after an appeal. So Chuck Norris appealed it to get it a PG rating. And he also did that with some of his other movies. So Chuck Norris can take a R-rated movie and make it PG, even though it has 2 F-bombs in it and a lot of violence.
All right, so this film opens up. First, it opens with patchy wildlife footage of a captive, wily wolf running around with some strange filter on it.
Well, the credits roll over that.
Yeah. And the music is interesting. The guy who wrote the music is Francesco De Masi, which is an Italian name, which is what I'd expect from someone who'd written music for a lot of spaghetti westerns, and that's exactly what this guy has done. Yeah. So they brought him in. It's very much like the Fistful of Dollars, Good, Bad, and the Ugly theme with the whistling overlaid with lots of bells and things.
I dug it. I thought it was good.
This movie feels like a film that was done 20 years before 1983. So transition from the sketchy coyote/wolf shots to some dudes who they're on horseback and they're moving a large herd of horses through what appear to be the Badlands. And, we can tell that they're up to no good because most of them are shirtless or wearing leather vests with no shirts under them. And they're doing a lot of shouting and they have guns. So we know they're up to no good.
Yeah. Do we know, are they like stealing cattle or something like that? Do they even get into what they're doing?
Yeah, they're horse thieves.
I haven't done it before, so I just didn't know.
So, yeah, anyways, these guys are moving this herd of horses down, and this is when we first see Norris, and he's silent, and he's observing everything. He is covered in dirt, and he's clearly been out in the field for quite some time, and he's watching everything progress through a rifle scope that he's holding in his hand. And not only is he watching these horse stealers move the horses towards the pickup point, but he's also watching some Texas State Police try to move in on this operation from the opposite direction. And he's using rocks as some sort of schematic war game diagram. I don't know what the point of that was. I guess to show what a tactical mastermind his character is. But he does a lot of disapproving head shaking, and that's kind of earned because these cops really bungle things. They prematurely kind of show that they're there, and over a megaphone they shout that these guys are under arrest for horse stealing, and in response to that they just open fire on them, and they like kill a couple of police officers, and the other ones surrender immediately, and then they're about to kill the others. And I don't know if you guys recognize the ringleader of this group.
He looked familiar.
Yes, he is Jorge Cervera Jr. And not only was he one of the bad guys in The Three Amigos, but he also played the loving grandfather who was rescued by Jacob, the sexy firefighter in Jacob's Ladder.
Whoa, deep cut.
Oh, yeah.
No way.
Good stuff. So, there you go.
Walker connection already.
Anyways, this guy's bad news. He's about to take out these cops. This is when Lone Wolf McQuade takes the rifle scope and puts it on a rifle and starts opening fire on vehicles. And they're blowing up. Kind of rattles everybody. Kind of gets their attention, I guess you could say.
So is he doing like multiple super shots here? Because he fires one bullet and cars just explode.
Yeah, that's a super shot, for sure.
And that really gets these cattle robbers' attention, does it not?
Absolutely. But they're really not intimidated. And so I guess instead of him like dispatching them from his high ground, he decides to walk down there.
Yeah, they tell him, they're like, hey, why don't you stand up so we can see you? And he's up on like this cliff. And so he does. And there's kind of like this weird triumphant swell of music. And then they try to shoot him. Right? But they don't hit him. And he keeps standing still. Mm-hmm. Wasn't that kind of weird?
It's a pretty bold move.
A little odd. One of the guys leans over to Hefe and whispers like, He's a Texas Ranger. You don't want to be messing with him, man.
Yeah. And so Hefe's like, why don't you come on down here? And we're like, he's surely not going to go down, is he? And then, yeah, Chuck Norris walks down the cliff, comes around the corner, and...
Yeah, he's sort of about to be cuffed by 3 guys, but he dispatches them pretty quickly.
With karate.
Yeah, pretty much. He's brought in front of Hefe, but then he kicks Hefe in the face. What we learn is that Hefe's father also had his teeth kicked in by a Texas Ranger, so, like father, like son.
Yeah, that was like asking for it. You're like, whoa, my father got his teeth kicked in by a Texas... Oh!
Spry you, jackass. Yeah, and then he basically grabs what can only be described as the Uzi. Just starts spraying fire, and he basically murders all of the people who were committing a misdemeanor.
Literally, Chuck Norris is surrounded by guys with guns pointed at him.
I don't know, it's like a bunch of them are just like running away. It's just like...
And he grabs an Uzi and does like this kind of twirling motion and is like rotating and shooting this Uzi and just mows everybody down effortlessly.
And, one of the deputies is like, oh my God, that was amazing. You were incredible. You were incredible. And he's like, oh, it's nothing. It was nothing. Stop fawning over me. Cut to an award ceremony. And it appears to be some sort of award ceremony for a law officer that's retiring. And we see Chuck Norris's character show up late with a can of beer in his hands, totally dirty and exhausted, but gets through the end of the ceremony. And he goes up and congratulates this guy whose name is Dakota. And Dakota looks like Sam Elliott or something.
Oh, totally.
Exactly. That's the vibe I was getting from this guy.
He's got the same vibe.
It's the same mustache, too, I think, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, he's portrayed by L.Q. Jones. And now this guy actually was on an episode of Kung Fu and Walker, Texas Ranger.
Yep. He's in an episode called The Reunion.
He was a cool character in this. I dug it. But yeah, so Chuck Norris's character, who I don't think we know his name yet, kind of walks up to Dakota, and you could tell Dakota and Chuck Norris's character are...
# old friends.
Oh, yeah. Old friends. And
Dakota's like CD. He's like an old now retired Texas Ranger.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, essentially that's what happened. And Chuck Norris's character just tosses him a beer.
Just out of the blue.
And we got to just get this out of the way here because... he's crushing beers like at a breakneck speed the whole movie, right?
Yeah, in all different places, all different times of day. He's just tossing them back.
And I thought he was drinking Miller High Life the whole movie because the colors and the logo look the same. But Bob, you looked this up, right?
Yeah, and he actually calls it out later. He says, give me a Pearl beer.
Yeah, Pearl beer was a beer that's was brewed in, I believe, San Antonio for many years. And so at that time, when the movie came out, it was like the Texan beer.
Yeah.
And apparently Pabst owns the recipe now and is kind of bringing it back.
Pabst bought it out a while back, and then Pabst started not brewing its own beer and sort of having its recipes produced in other factories. So I think they shut down the Pearl Beer Factory several years ago, and so it stopped being made in Texas. I think it's very hard to find. It doesn't have an ad campaign or anything. The closest thing to an ad campaign is this podcast, I think.
Well, I did find that article that said that they were brewing it again and they were selling it only in certain places in Texas.
Interesting. So,
yeah.
I mean, that's like a very hipster move. Do hipsters care about Pearl beer? It's interesting.
I mean...
They love all the old beers. It's like High Life, Narragansett, PBR.
Schlitz.
But
anyway, like... dude is crushing beers in the weirdest moments too in this movie, right?
Oh, we'll get to some real odd ones, but yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But I guess the director Steve Carver wanted Chuck Norris to have more of a harder edge in the movie, and so he said he wanted to have Chuck Norris drinking a lot of beer.
A harder edge from what? I mean, before this, he was in a fight to the death with Bruce Lee. He was in The Octagon. He fought against like some genetic mutant monster. He's already got a pretty hard edge at this point.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, all beer has ever given me is like a beer gut. So I don't know how about the harder edge, but I guess Chuck Norris's objection was, hey, I want this to be a good representation for my kids. And watching this movie, the director definitely won out on the beer front. So
I think on all fronts. Yeah, so right as he's handing a beer to his old bud, the captain says, I got to see you in my office.
Never a good sign.
Yeah, right. So Norris's character gets called in, and I believe this is when we learned that his name is McQuade, and the captain is all pissed off because it sounds like one of the senators in Texas is looking to shut down the Texas Ranger program, and it's because of McQuade's style of doing business, which is pretty lone wolf and interfering with everything, and I have to imagine killing all of the suspects, which is what we just witnessed him doing, right? The only guy who lived, he kicked his teeth in, so, there's that, I guess. But
they were just in the way of my Uzi.
Right. So this is the only time we hear Lone Wolf, so that's, it rings a bell.
We did watch about 2 minutes of a wolf just walking at the beginning of the movie,
course.
So.
Yeah, and he says, I'm going to assign you a partner so that you can keep up appearances. And his new partner comes in, and it's that doe-eyed deputy who Chuck Norris's character McQuade saved his bacon earlier on.
And that just happens to be the guy that's paired up with him.
Yep, his name is Ramos. And Ramos is really excited. McQuade's like, I work alone. And then McQuade drives home.
Yeah. Bob, can you dig into those wheels here?
Yeah, I was going to bring it up earlier because when we first saw this vehicle, when he was perched up in the desert, from a distance, it looks just kind of like an old, like early Bronco or something. But upon closer inspection, we see the Dodge logo. And then we see that this is a Dodge Ram Charger. And this thing is beat to hell. Finish is all messed up.
He's been mudding for days in that thing.
It is amazing. I wish I had that truck.
And I love on the hood of this thing, it's like an off-white color. Is that what it is?
Yeah, like a tan, but like
maybe with
more
a few
rust.
stripes. Yeah. And then on the front hood is literally like a metallic ram's head.
Oh, yeah. That was like the style of those trucks back in the day.
That's so good. I'm going to have to get one of those for my car.
Yeah.
I say go for it. You should also get the rack of dome lights that he's got on top.
Oh,
that
man.
seem to constantly run whenever the car is on.
Yeah, it's like a kid's like toy police car. When you move the wheels, the lights go.
Yeah,
man.
This thing is jacked, though.
So, cut to some sort of air hangar somewhere, and there appears to be some sort of arms deal going down between a bunch of Cubans. And they're about to hand off some money, but then they pull their guns on this guy. And this guy, we realize, is David Carradine. And of course, it's an 80s action movie, so we see an actor who we recognize, and we know that he's a bad guy. But in case you didn't know he's a bad guy, when the arms deal goes awry, he karate kicks a gun out of someone's hand, and then everyone gets mowed down.
Yeah.
And he's left to not only keep his guns that he was about to sell, but take the suitcase full of money, too.
Win's a win.
Yeah, for sure.
Pretty good day at the office.
Yeah, and he is established as a bad guy. Thank you, 80s movie.
It's just crystal clear.
It was concise and expertly done.
Unlike our podcast.
Agreed.
Back at McQuade's house, we really get to see his living quarters, and this is pretty much like Top Dog, if you've seen Top Dog.
Yeah.
His house, an absolute wreck, and it's got a random-ass dog running around. Now, in Top Dog, it was a mutt. In this case, it appears to be a trained wolf.
I was thinking of the Top Dog thing earlier. This is what sealed it, though. He was already at odds with his commanding officer. He did things his own way. He, drank beer all the time. And then he goes home and it's just a complete mess.
Don't forget he was assigned a partner he never wanted.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So at this point, Top Dog is ripping off Lone Wolf McQuade pretty well.
So, yeah, he's hanging out at home and he's crushing more Pearl beers. He's got a whole fridge full of them with the classic pull tab. And, he's just crushing those things, and this is when his new partner Ramos shows up, and Ramos is pretty disgusted by the house.
He lets himself in and starts looking around, and he's like, JJ? We might say that that's apparently his nickname.
His name is Jim, but he goes by JJ or McQuade.
Yeah. So his new partner's like, JJ, and no one's answering, and he's looking around his place, and he's like, this place is disgusting, man. This is gross, bro. And all of a sudden, he finds himself faced with the barrel of Chuck Norris's gun.
Just a stand your ground state, man. You just walk out of someone's house, not in Texas.
I mean, you should know better. And McQuade is obviously, shirtless and in flare jeans, the classic uniform for kicking ass. And Ramos is like, whoa, man, I just, we got to go do some work. We're partners now. And McQuade's like, I don't do the partner thing. Scram. And so he sicks his wolf on Ramos, who then drives away. But he doesn't drive too far away. He kind of parks off in the distance and spies on the house. And he gets to see the same montage that we get to see, which is McQuade in the same uniform, i.e. flange jeans and shirtless, except he's got a bunch of guns and he's just shooting them at random makeshift targets in his backyard and jumping around and rolling on the ground. It's freaking awesome.
It was awesome. And it was almost as if it was like in a Trippy Days, like that scene, right?
He was hammered, man. He was drunk.
Yeah, I was. So his partner's like up on the hill, like watching. He's like, awesome.
Yeah, I know, right? I was like, man, this scene's really awesome. And just as I was thinking that, like you see a clip of Ramos up there on the hill, like, whoa.
This is awesome.
Yeah. So good.
Oh, man. Unfortunately, we don't really get to see much of that later on. So, enjoy it while it lasts. So yeah, after doing all that, he's gotten his morning beer in and his calisthenics routine, which is lugging a 12 gauge around and rolling on the ground with it. He decides it's time to visit his family.
I thought he was a lone wolf.
Yeah, not only that, his captain just chewed him out for not having a family.
Like the press, they want to see Rangers that have who's a family man, and so you're like, oh, he doesn't have a family. He's a lone wolf. Okay.
Right. And instead, I guess he has a wife who I guess is an ex-wife. We don't actually know that.
Yeah,
right.
I just kind of assumed they were like an ex-wife, but on good terms.
Oh, yeah. We're left to assume a lot in this film, and that's one of those things.
Not assume, interpret. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't want to get into the backstory here in this type of film, so I'm glad they just rolled with it.
So yeah, I guess McQuade is showing up, and he's going to take his daughter horse riding.
Who looks to be about the same age as his wife, though. Pretty close.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I'm like, what?
And she's going to go horseback riding with him, but her boyfriend shows up, and she's like, oh, this is my boyfriend. And then she tells him, I'm actually going to leave. So she's like, okay. So he showed up for no apparent reason.
Yeah,
only to introduce himself.
Yeah, but he gets to meet McQuade, and I think up to this point we've heard a few things like, oh yeah, I've heard about McQuade, he's legendary, stuff like that. And even McQuade's daughter's boyfriend's like, oh, I've heard of the stories. And
I was thinking McQuade would be the real protective father, like, oh, this guy's garbage, he's no good. And he kind of starts off that way, but then pretty much immediately just warms up to the guy.
Yeah.
Which again, I'm just like, what the hell's going on?
He's like, have her back by 9. You know what? Actually, just leave. I'm going to take her horseback riding.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, McQuade takes his daughter horseback riding, which is also the horse track. And, his bud Dakota's there as well. And so they are preparing this horse for his daughter to ride. And while they're preparing the horse, we see David Carradine's character again looking down on the stables, and he's spying on McQuade. And not only is he spying on McQuade, but he's got company in doing so. And that is a little person in a mechanized wheelchair who, once again, 1980s movie, he's hanging out with David Carradine. we know he's a bad guy. And if we don't know he's a bad guy, the cackles that emanate from his mouth very soon after he stares through his binoculars will tell us so.
Yeah, and I wasn't really expecting like a James Bond kind of villain at this point in the movie, and I was pleasantly surprised. I was like, okay. All
you
right.
weren't? Okay, well, we'll get to that in a second, because just as we have the James Bond villain, enter the Bond girl.
Literally.
Yeah. There's this woman riding a horse, and Dakota draws McQuade's attention to her. He's like, hey, check that out.
Yeah, and mind you, this chick is like maybe in her 30s. These creepy old guys are like, yeah, check that. Yeah.
Oh, they have a fantastic quote from Dakota here. He asks McQuade, how'd you like to bite that in the butt? Develop lockjaw and be dragged to death.
The hell?
Let's dissect that. He wants to bite her butt, and then he wants to get lockjaw from the experience.
Assuming she has rabies, I guess?
I guess, and then be dragged to death.
It's just the icing on the cake.
He might have been talking about the horse, you know.
You know?
Regardless, I don't think that's an experience anyone wants. Just saying.
All right, well.
Texas talk.
Yeah, it is.
We'll chalk it up.
Yeah. If any Texans out there have some insight into that phrase, I mean, if your grandfather said it, we want to know.
Right. And if anyone has knows anyone who developed lockjaw and then was dragged to their death, please let us know as well.
Have them call us.
So we learned that this woman is the widow of a very wealthy man, played by Barbara Carrera. And I actually wrote in my notes that this is like a Bond woman. And she actually later on plays a Bond girl this very same year.
And it's the non-sanctioned James Bond movie where Sean Connery reprises his role as James Bond.
Never say never again.
But hey, at least it's with Sean Connery, so
I don't know if we can say that now.
Oh, that's true too. Yeah, everyone's coming for Sean Connery these days too, rightfully so. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. So while the creepy old guys are creeping on this chick,
Sean Connery style.
Exactly. McQuade's daughter is on this horse that has a little wild Mustang in it, and a Mustang that's driving by backfires and sends the horse into a frenzy with her on it. And this woman actually races after McQuade's daughter and calms the horse down and saves her. And this is how McQuade and this woman meet. And this woman's name is Lola, a temptress for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is when we learn that she is the girlfriend of David Carradine's character, whose name is Wilkes. And he shows up on the scene because, this was quite the commotion. And he's kind of like macking on this woman and also just like flashing a toothy grin and all this stuff.
His toothy grin is best in the industry, maybe.
Top five. Definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it is gross. Gross.
It's on point.
Yeah. So he pulls up in a car, and the car has a fantastic vanity plate. The car license plate is Carate.
Carate. So good.
So David Carradine's character is like, oh, this is McQuade. I hear you're very much into the martial arts.
Yeah, and so he had heard about McQuade. It's like his reputation is so big that everybody knows that the Texas Ranger McQuade is like a kung fu master.
Honestly, though, if all he does is go around and high kicks people's teeth out, which seems to be his MO, I think you do that enough times, you kind of get a reputation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Make a name for yourself.
Fair enough. And
just saying.
He did know how to spin around with a Uzi and like take out a small village. So that was pretty good too.
Yeah. Accuracy on point.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like, my boyfriend's going to do a karate demonstration later. It's like,
he needs a reason to stick around.
Like, this has to be the 1980s. Who would do that? Right?
Yeah.
So she's like, oh, you should stick around and see it. And he's like, okay.
Well, he was like, oh, no. And then Dakota's like, no, you want to bite her butt, right? So
right, you want to develop that lockjaw, bro.
Yeah.
So then Chuck Norris is like, oh, yeah, I guess I'll stick around for this karate demo if I can hang out with you, bae.
Yeah, so they show up at this party, and it is pretty sick. They've got what appears to be an open bar, and Bob, what's the experience here?
Yeah, McQuade saunters up to this bar, and just immediately he's like, you got Pearl beer? And the guy's like, Nope, we got a Heineken, Michelob, Dos Equis. McQuade goes, forget it. He turns around. And then almost immediately he has a pearl beer in his hand. Like he already had it on him.
Exactly.
It's like, wait, they didn't have pearl beer. Where'd you get that?
BYOB.
No. You guys missed that. Lola shows up and she says to the guy, bottom shelf. And he's like,
oh, is that what it was? I thought she was saying, like, give me a bottom shelf mixed drink or something.
Me too.
And I was like, that seems weird. She's loaded.
it's like, they're stashing away the Pearl beer only for the VIPs, I guess.
Yeah.
It was one of those things. Literally, McQuade has probably about like half a six-pack with him left over wherever he goes for the remainder of this movie. So I think that he just had the beer on him, and he's like, okay, well, I'll just drink my own then. And then she asked for a mixed drink and said bottom shelf, which I don't know why you would ever say that.
I mean, I would say that when I was in college, and they were cheap. Bottom shelf is like the well drinks, right? That's the cheap
this is
stuff.
an open bar.
Well, either way, she's rich, right?
Yeah, so Evan, your theory might work out. I like the idea that he brought his own beer.
I mean, he probably did, regardless. So yeah, during this party, there's some dancing, and then David Carradine's character comes out in a ridiculous, red boxing jumpsuit gi thing, and there's some hapless victim in there where he just throat punches a bunch of times, and expectedly the guy just collapses. Then he shouts out to McQuade's character, and he says, there's Ranger McQuade's in the audience. Care for a little sparring action? A little duel?
Maybe do a little wager?
Yeah, McQuade's like, I don't fight for money.
Yep. You're like, oh, well, that's too bad, because I kind of wanted to see you guys fight. Now, do you think that David Carradine's character, the main bad guy here, Rowley Wilkes, do you think that he staged this karate demo just to face off with Chuck Norris's character?
I have no idea. I don't really know why it's happening.
Yeah.
So maybe.
It's possible. It's kind of weird. You don't really get a full motivation of the bad guy, but it seemed like almost to me like this guy has it bad for McQuade. He really wants to fight McQuade.
I mean, if that's the case, it's really backfiring, because all that's happening is he's not fighting McQuade and McQuade's stealing his girlfriend. So I don't really get it.
Yeah, I mean, but
Anyways, fight happens with McQuade anyways, because his partner Ramos is called a greaser by a redneck at the party, and then gets in a fight. And then McQuade has to come in and do some jump kicking.
Save the day and pretty much wreck house on all of Wilkes' goons.
And Wilkes steps in, and it looks like he and JJ are going to have a little showdown there. But Lola steps in, stops the fight, and instead has JJ take her out on date night. Very romantic.
They're like, let's get out of here. They drive off in the Ram Charger, and they go to this bar, and this bar looks straight out of Walker, Texas Ranger, does it not?
Complete with a clientele, yeah.
And they immediately size him up, get ready to fight him.
And some skeezy guy comes over and says to Lola, how about a kiss? Once again, great way to pick up chicks.
Yeah. Tried and true method.
Yeah, yep. Right in front of Chuck Norris.
She punches the guy in the face, and then they decide to leave.
Now, that skeezy guy, who was that?
Isn't that Chuck Norris's brother?
Mm-hmm. Aaron Norris is the skeezy guy.
So, excellent date regardless. And, they're making out at the end of the date. And while they're making out, McQuade's daughter and her boyfriend are at some other makeout point. But they witness some sort of heist going awry where a truck is being held up. And they're about to leave and call the cops. But they're cut off by some bad guys. And her boyfriend is shot. And she's in a car. And they ram the car off a cliff.
And it rolls over off this cliff, and she's inside it, and you're like, she gone.
Damn.
And I don't even know if the bad guys knew that she was in the car.
Oh, they definitely did. She was screaming at them.
Okay, well, then they're like, well, we'll just roll her off the cliff. Done.
He'll take care of this.
So McQuade gets the call, and, he rushes in to try to figure out what happened, and this is when he realizes that the feds are now involved because it's some sort of arms deal or something like that went down. And like in Walker, anytime the feds are involved, you know that they're going to be a bunch of stiffs. And no one really wants to deal with the feds because they're the worst. You know, they definitely pull rank on the Texas Rangers, and you think that they've got one up on the Texas Rangers, but this is when JJ's partner, Ramos, sort of pulls one out, and he's like, hey, no, it's cool, man. We're going to look up what was in those trucks because my friend gave me the login codes for Aristotle, the federal government's computer. And they go to like this ancient dinosaur computer and plug in a bunch of codes. And this is maybe the most Walker, Texas Ranger like part of this whole thing, where he's like, his computers are super dumb, but his young whippersnapper partner hacks in and actually does something useful with a computer. And they realize that the truck that was stolen is full of tons of guns.
And someone had to like get a floppy disk and make like a Word file on that floppy disk of just like gun names.
So they get some sick, useful information out of that. And they're like, guns are involved. So McQuade's all like, oh, an arms deal? I've got a contact that I know, and we'll try to get him to squeal. His name is Snow. And so they basically bust in on Snow, who's hanging out in some skeezy... I guess he's in some sort of textile mill. And so they bust in, and Snow tries to run away, starts shooting at them, and then he drives away in his car and is chased down by McQuade. And then McQuade jumps on the back of his vehicle and is dragged around.
Yeah, and this scene is pretty amazing because they're chasing Snow. He busts out a window, jumps up onto the roof of this textile mill, jumps down to a box truck, jumps off the box truck, gets in his car and speeds away. Chuck Norris's character follows suit and just winds up on top of Snow's vehicle and is trying to hold on. Snow has a gun, and you're like, okay, Snow, you know he's on top. Shoot the gun. And he doesn't. Chuck Norris gets flipped onto the front of the car, and Snow's like, oh, yeah, I've got a gun. And he goes to pull the gun on Chuck, and he's out of bullets.
Click. The best way was how he actually got on the truck, though. He was holding onto the back, and like his feet were like dragging, and then he climbed his way up into the bed of the truck and then onto the roof.
It was awesome.
Yeah. This actor, William Sanderson, who plays Snow, is in 3 episodes of Walker, Texas Ranger.
He looks like a Walker villain.
Yeah, so instead, he tries to crash into something to get McQuade off his car, but McQuade jumps off the car, and then he slams his car into like a gasoline tank or something. The car catches fire, but McQuade's able to rescue him out of the vehicle before he blows up.
And we get a pretty amazing explosion here. It was awesome.
This is a good one.
I was thinking he was going to let the guy blow up with him. You know, I thought the guy was going to blow up and not get the information out of this guy, but you know, McQuade was like, no, I'm going to chance it and get this guy out here, even though it might blow up while I'm still here.
Yeah, so he gets him out, and the guy's still not talking, so they decide to do the best thing they know they can do to get the talk out of this guy. They go to Dakota's farm, and Dakota is like, oh man, I'm so glad you brought this guy. I've been so bored.
Yeah, I've been retired like a day.
Right, yeah. Right. And it's like, I guess I can't be held liable for any damage that comes to a victim. So let me chain him up to this wagon wheel and then shoot an Uzi in his general direction and get him to talk. And they get the Uzi going, and as do the words.
Yeah, he spills.
He blabbers, and he says Falcone has been doing a lot of arms deals lately, and Falcone's behind all this stuff. McQuade's all like, all right, I'm going to go see Falcone, but I got to stop at home first and take a shower, which seems completely and totally out of character.
Yeah, he's all over the place. Letting people live after just mowing people down, taking showers after being dirty the entire time.
Yep.
He never cleans his truck, though.
It's true.
No. So he heads out, goes home to shower, and leaves Snow in the capable hands of Dakota and his new partner. He gets home, and there's this Bentley parked in my out front of my house, and he goes in, and you hear like humming or something. And at this point I thought like, oh, well, he said he was going to go home and take a shower. Like, this is where they have like a really awkward romantic scene where like she's in the shower waiting for him or something. But instead, this movie hits a more patronizing tone, and she's vacuuming his apartment and cleaning for him.
Yeah, and it's my understanding that this is the first time she's been to his house, right? He walks in to find Lola vacuuming his house. And you're like, oh, she just hit it off with him and was like, oh, I'll just show up randomly at his house and start cleaning it because it's a pigsty, which honestly, it really needed a woman's touch there.
It did. Although one thing that didn't need the woman's touch was his stash of Pearl beer from his fridge.
McQuade walks in. He's like, what are you doing? You're cleaning my place? And she's like, it was a mess. And then he goes to the refrigerator. On top of his refrigerator, it's cleaned off, except there's like a bunch of stuff, like medicine bottles on top of his refrigerator. He's like, what are these? And she's like,
vitamins.
He's like, what? Gross. And then he opens the refrigerator and there's almost nothing in there. And he's like, where's my beer? And she's like, oh, I threw that out. You need to eat healthy. And he's like, hell no. And he digs into the trash can and pulls out the beer and just cracks one. I'm like, is this an advertisement for Pearl beer?
So he goes to the racetrack, and this is when we learn the name of the little person that we saw deviously looking on like a Bond villain. This is Falcone. And Falcone hangs out in his luxury box overlooking the racetrack. It's protected by thugs, which are no match for McQuade, who dispatches the guy, and then goes in, and inside we see a whole bunch of like gold-plated arcade games and pinball machines, and the music that's playing is like the Nutcracker. It's like the Sugar Plum Fairy suite or something. It's so weird.
And he's playing like one of those glass table video games, and also every time Falcone is in the scene, you hear like the electric his electric wheelchair sounds. It's awesome.
Yeah, and basically the long and short of it is he doesn't know anything about it, but he does say that it's a shame that Snow's not going to live through the night. Dun dun dun. And just as he says that menacing phrase, he hits some button and there's like a secret door, and he just like rotates, he like disappears behind a wall right in front of McQuade's face. It's like, that was just for dramatic effect?
That was
like,
so
what?
James Bond. It was it was like the wall that turns around and the guy's gone. McQuade's like, oh, well, he just said that my witness is not going to live through the night. So obviously Falcone knows a lot more than he's putting on, and he's taunting me. I better get back to Dakota and Ramos and make sure they're okay.
He speeds back, and meanwhile, those two are playing poker with their captive Snow kind of bound and gagged by the side there. And as they're playing poker, Ramos goes to get another beer, and that's when the bad guys show up and start kicking ass. And bad guys not only include dudes with Uzis, they also include David Carradine's character, Wilkes, who shows up and steps on Dakota's neck and, I guess, snaps it.
Chokes him out, yeah.
It's ice cold. Again, we know this guy's bad news.
Absolutely.
But he's going to be redeemed by the end of the movie, though, right?
I think so.
No.
Okay, he's bad.
So McQuade gets to the farm, and he's too late, but he gets in there, and he sees Dakota and Snow dead on the floor. But he looks over, and Ramos is kind of like sitting there with his head in his hands, like, oh man, I didn't save them. And they both try to process it and try to get over it, and obviously they're pretty shook up by the whole thing. And this is when they learn that McQuade's been taken off the case. The feds are taking over the case entirely. It's gotten way too personal, and McQuade's been placed on probation.
The FBI's like, look, dude, you withheld evidence from the crime scene to get this information about the guns, and then you get a witness, Snow, and you interrogate him illegally, and now he's dead, so we aren't going to get any information out of this guy. So, yeah, pretty much his captain's like, look, I have to put you on probation. And McQuade's like, do you want my star? And the chief's like, that won't be necessary.
Not yet.
So, McQuade, he does what anyone would do, and he returns back to his house and hangs out with his dog and Lola, too. And they do a lot of cleaning. And then they're outside, and she has a hose.
Yeah,
and,
it's almost kind of like a relationship building montage kind of thing going on. And
so believable.
Actually, I got tingles from it. Yeah,
this is the guy who's got the karate Iron Fist comic book here. So
It's a magazine, not a comic book. There's an interview with Chuck Norris in it, Evan.
It sure looked like a comic book.
Well, it does have a comic book in there too, but the main meat of the magazine is a long interview with Chuck Norris. This is before there were blogs and readily available.
And fanfic?
Well, I'm sure fanfic was around, but you couldn't find it online or anything, you know. Like an interview in a magazine, that's all people have from Chuck Norris for a long time was this interview.
And now you have it.
And now you're making fun of me for it, you know?
I am.
I'm making fun of you too.
Thanks, Bob.
Oh, God. Okay. Well, anyway, I mean, this scene did give me the feels. I mean, like, he's got Lola. He's hanging out at his crappy house, and she still likes him. There's hope for guys out there that there's a Lola for you. That's all I got to say. And she finds the hose, the actual hose at Chuck Norris's house, and starts spraying water at Chuck Norris's character. And you're like, oh man, they're having a little flirt with the hose, and he's dodging the water, but he gets all wet, and then he throws her into the mud, and they start rolling around like it's Woodstock 1969 in the mud.
Yeah, and like while they're spraying water at each other, like the dog gets wet, and it's just like, what the hell, man?
Three's a party.
Yeah, the dog's like, I don't want to have anything to do with this. But yeah, so, you know, they sort of like make out in the mud, and, you know, it's a PG rated film, so we don't see anything else, which I'm fine with that. And we see enough shirtless Chuck Norris, so I don't think we need more of that.
He does have a lot of chest hair.
I mean, he has more hair on his knuckles than I have on my chest, so there you go. Yeah, so, you know, after that, they're just sort of hanging out and relaxing, and we see like it's nighttime now, and they're sleeping, and the dog is hanging out outside asleep, and this car just kind of slowly backs into his driveway, which, like, he's in the middle of nowhere. Like, you'd hear a car coming for miles and miles.
I think they put a silencer on the car, I think is what happened.
They
right?
may have, yeah. They put on like foam tires. Regardless, they definitely put a silencer on the Uzi and then gunned down his dog, which is pretty messed up.
Yeah, the dog was like about to like let loose on these bad guys, and they're like, oh crap.
Yeah, let me screw this silencer on the Uzi. And then they kill the dog, and then the guy makes a point to remove the silencer from the Uzi.
Right, which we find out why in a second.
Yeah, they then shoot through the windows and then speed off, and McQuade is left kind of reeling until he realizes that his dog's been killed as well, at which point, like, he's quite pissed.
And do the bad guys check in with Carradine now?
Yeah, and he's like, do you make sure they got the message? So, you know, he's been put on probation, and, you know, his dog just got killed, so things are looking pretty bad for him. And this is when this FBI agent pays him a visit. And this is FBI Agent Jackson. And he's like, hey, man, I know you've been through some tough times, but you know this country more than anyone, and we got to find out where they're keeping these guns. So I have rented a plane for the afternoon. Let's go for a ride. And they go riding around the backcountry looking for anything abnormal where people are storing a ton of guns. And they find a hangar and decide that they're going to come back to it with reinforcements. But they've got to do that not by plane, but by 4x4.
Yeah.
So this next scene is pretty amazing, and kind of a parallel to Walker, Texas Ranger here in this scene, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah. McQuade's doing his job way better than the feds. I mean, the feds are a bunch of softies. They're pretty terrible at doing anything. And that includes driving a 4x4 over uneven terrain.
So McQuade and Ramos, his new partner that he's finally accepted after his new partner showed that he could work the gray by stealing information from the FBI, which he didn't really get into. Like, literally as soon as Ramos like kind of breaks the law, McQuade's like, okay, you're my partner now.
Yeah. All right. You've proven yourself.
Anyway, so they're leading this charge to the base they saw by plane that is like where all the stolen weapons are, they think. And they're helping the FBI get there through the rough terrain, and the Ram charges going off these crazy hills. And behind them in a GMC vehicle is the FBI. And they're like, this is a wild goose chase. Why do you trust this guy?
Oh, I have the actual quotes here. So the lead FBI agent turns to Jackson. He's like, who the hell does this son of a bitch think he is? And this is, keep in mind, this is like one of the worst acted scenes I've ever encountered.
Yeah, this guy's terrible.
Yeah, and Jackson's like, that son of a bitch knows this country better than you know the warts on your wife's backside. And the guy's like, well, why don't we all line up and kiss his ass?
Right around this time, the FBI's vehicle, which is behind McQuade's, gets stuck and the wheel starts spinning.
Because it's not a Dodge.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. And we get, right before this, we get the first shot of the grill that's an establishing shot that it's a GMC. It's not a Dodge. So Chuck Norris is kind of like, oh, you guys need my help? And the FBI agents kind of like bite their lip as if, yeah, we kind of do. So McQuade turns around and gets up behind the GMC with his Dodge Ram Charger and pushes them out of the ditch because the Dodge has a lot more power than the GMC.
He's also got a super sick, like, turbocharged switch that he can flip on, and that just gives him extra power.
Yeah, apparently it's got like a booster.
Whenever he flips the switch, it makes the camera shift to a shot of an engine.
Yeah, it sounds like the 1966 Batmobile revving up.
Firing up. Yep.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, he gets them out of a little bit of a mire there, and then they keep driving on, and they arrive at this hangar, and they're spying on it in the daytime, and the lead FBI agent has no idea what he's doing. He keeps trying to do things that he shouldn't be doing, but Jackson and McQuade kind of keep him in check. So they start moving in at night, and they're kind of getting closer and closer, and then the lead FBI agent just jumps out from behind a crate and shouts through a megaphone, all right, you guys are all under arrest, at which point the arms dealers with crap loads of weapons start opening fire on the people who are trying to arrest them, and it doesn't go very well. Now, to this I will say, this is the same strategy that the state troopers tried using earlier, which got them killed, and they were probably using the same prop megaphone. Seems like a recurring theme here, where you probably shouldn't immediately announce your presence if you're trying to arrest someone who's very dangerous.
Yeah, subtlety is needed, like shooting one of the cars and making it blow up.
Yeah, for sure. Anyways, these guys open fire on the agents that are trying to do this whole sting operation, and it all gets turned upside down, and both McQuade and Jackson and McQuade's partner Ramos are all hit in a line of fire and injured, and McQuade, we think, is the sole survivor, but he's actually taken hostage, and this is when he realizes that Wilkes is in charge of this whole operation, and Wilkes gets out of his helicopter and delivers some punishing blows to McQuade, who's got his hands held behind his back. He decides that they're not just going to kill McQuade there, they have a much more punishing death for him.
Yep, so David Carradine's Wilkes takes McQuade and throws him into the Ram Charger, and you're like, okay. And so Chuck Norris is kind of down for the count too. His vision's going in and out, and you can tell because they just mess with the focus on the camera from like Norris vision.
Oh, I thought that was just my vision going in and out, but
it might have been.
You were having a mild stroke while watching the movie.
Yeah. And while this is going on, you notice there are like some bulldozers digging a ditch, and I'm like, they're going to bury this guy alive.
I'm amazed you picked up on that. I had no idea what they were about to do. So
they put the Ram Charger with Chuck Norris in the front seat into this pit that's been dug, and they cover it with dirt, but not before David Carradine's character takes the time to rip the Texas Ranger star off of Chuck Norris's chest.
And so then Wilkes gets in his chopper and flies off, and they bury McQuade. And watching from behind a nearby dune is his partner Ramos, who's like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. This is insane. And Ramos builds up the courage, and he's like, okay, I got to dig my partner out. I got to get these bad guys out of here. So he forces an assault onto the guys who are guarding this grave. Meanwhile, we see that even though it's been buried under tons of dirt,
I think this is my favorite scene of this movie. Is it not?
Absolutely. Why not? Like, yeah. What? I don't.
Yeah. So let's just picture Chuck Norris is 10 feet underground in a Ram Charger, buried alive.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I kind of just want to read the synopsis from Wikipedia of this scene. I feel like it does a fantastic job here. McQuade is caught and sadistically beaten by Wilkes, who then orders that McQuade be placed in his truck and buried under a truckload of dirt, ignoring Richardson's pleas, Richardson being Lola, for mercy for the three men. After regaining consciousness in his truck, a Dodge Ram Charger 1983 model, McQuade produces a beer and pours it over his face. Then, using his homemade supercharger system, McQuade charges his truck through the dirt, miraculously breaking himself free, and then rescues Ramos and Jackson. All three men are weakened due to being shot and beaten.
The three of them sit on the ground because apparently there are no bad guys left. And, of course...
Share a Pearl beer.
You got any more of those in there?
Another one. So he's about to die, and I was like, oh, he's having a beer and it's time of death. He cracks the beer, right? And then starts pouring it over his head, and then starts drinking it, too.
Yeah, he pours it over his head, starts the engine, flips on the supercharger. I think he lets out a scream, and this thing just, like, busts out like a bat out of hell.
So awesome.
Meanwhile, Ramos, who's doing like this whole heroic act out on top, he's like, oh, I guess I didn't have to do anything because this guy just freaking drove from underground.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just drove up from being buried.
Right.
I don't know if the science checks out on that, but man, it was amazing.
I would say if it were any other car, the science would not check out. But it's a Dodge Ram Charger, 1983 model.
With a super experimental supercharger.
Yeah, his own custom setup.
Checks out.
And but I just love the fact that the three of them after that are like, oh, let's sit down and relax for a second and share one beer together.
I mean, honestly, the three of us, if we were together, we'd only be sharing one beer, right?
Well, yeah, with COVID and everything, yeah.
Okay, so that ridiculous scene behind us, they kind of go back into town and try to assess the situation and where to go from there, because that was pretty intense, and obviously their bus didn't really work out. Back in town, McQuade goes to see his wife, and his daughter's now missing.
Coincidence?
Right, like what's that all about? And just as he's wondering where his daughter is, this limo pulls up, and out comes Falcone in his devious wheelchair. And he's all like, I know where your daughter is. Wilkes, he went sour on this deal. We were working together, and then he took all the guns and went away to Mexico. But I know exactly where he is, so I'll tell you that.
He's like, but there's a catch. He's like, I'll tell you where he is, but you got to make sure that my assets are protected. And McQuade's ex-wife is like, do whatever you have to do to save our daughter. We're like, okay, he's in. They're going to go to Mexico.
You say they, but it's really only McQuade that goes to Mexico. Solo mission, lone wolf, until he gets across the border, goes into a cantina, and who's waiting there? Jackson, baby.
Yeah, the one cantina he goes into in Mexico, because there's probably only one.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, wait, Ramos is here too. And they're like, okay, I guess we're coming along. And each one of them is like totally hobbled, right? They've all been shot, and they're like climbing up mountains and stuff. And what ensues is maybe my favorite part of the movie, which is this over-the-top montage of them like hiking over mountains, literally wading through rivers. Rappelling down a mountainside. It's like, what are we doing here? It's like summer camp.
It's good.
And they make it to this impoundment, and McQuade's all like, okay, well, I guess I'm just gonna go get my daughter out of this room. And so he gets her out, and that's when he sees Lola as well. And so he's like, all right, I guess I'm just gonna get both of you out of here. And so they're just gonna sort of peacefully walk out of the building, but they are recognized. And this is when all hell breaks loose. And his backup, super clutch in that they've got just a crap load of grenades, and they love throwing them.
Yeah. At one point, McQuade's partner, Ramos, throws a grenade, and he forgot to pull the pin. And it causes the bad guys to come out because they're like, oh, he forgot to pull the pin. And so he throws another grenade and then blows up the bad guys to comic effect.
It's hilarious. What ensues is just complete, utter madness. And they're just blowing stuff up all over the place. Like, there's no There's no rhyme or reason to any of it. McQuade's daughter gets shot in the leg, so they're kind of like sidelined. And so they can't really do anything. And this is when Wilkes shows up and he's all like, oh, I'm just going to run you down in this ridiculous, like, half-track military vehicle.
Yeah, with a gun mounted on the top of it.
Yeah, and McQuade's like, oh, well, I can counter that by getting in this bulldozer, putting the blade up in front of me so you can't shoot at me. And then they play this really slow, boring game of chicken where they crash into each other, but the bulldozer overpowers the half-track, and Wilkes is forced up against a building, and the vehicle is out of commission.
And we're like, oh, so Wilkes he's out of commission too. He might have even been squished in there for all we know, until we see movement on the door.
You hear like a rattle, and then the rattle is accompanied by some absolutely sick music, which is basically like a weird synth sound combined with a church organ.
So good. And David Carradine's Wilkes steps out of the vehicle, and we're like, it's on. This is what we've been waiting for. Kung Fu versus Norris Do.
Yeah, Kung Fu versus Chun Cook Do. At this point, they've both got guns drawn on each other. McQuade's got his 45 pointed at Wilkes, and Wilkes has the Uzi. It's the Uzi. It gets everywhere. Everyone's got it.
That thing gets around.
Yeah.
But, of course, they throw their guns down and put up much more lethal weapons, which are their hands and feet. And difference in style here.
Yeah, so Wilkes is more flowery, like animal postures, like maybe someone who mimed this kind of stuff for the camera on TV. And, I dig it, too. It's good. And he has that serious eyes, and that grin, too, sells it for me. And Norris is a little more down to earth, little barrel house brawler kind of scenario. At one point, Wilkes kicks dirt in Chuck Norris's eyes. Dirty move.
Yeah, that's dirty.
Yeah.
It looks like Wilkes has the upper hand after the whole dirt trick, and he's about to deliver a finishing blow. But McQuade's daughter actually runs up to protect him, and Wilkes punches her in the face, and that's enough to bring on the full rage of Lone Wolf McQuade.
And McQuade emits a roaring growl.
Dare we say a howl.
Ooh.
Gets up and does a flying jump kick and takes out Wilkes. And I think around this point, everyone's kind of celebrating, like, oh, we did it, we're safe. And then Wilkes gets up, grabs the Uzi, and aims it at McQuade. But what happens, Bob?
Lola takes one for the team.
Yeah.
Just jumps out in front of him.
This is classic Bond girl fashion.
She had blood on her hands, so she took a bullet for the team to become a good guy.
Wilkes is sad about it, too. You could see in his eyes. He's like,
he had feelings for this woman, and, we don't really know the status of their relationship, but he's like, I better get out of here. So he runs and gets out of there, right?
Yeah, he runs into a building, and as she's dying, she's all like, I just want you to know that Wilkes is the one who killed my husband, and he's been having me serve as like his concubine, and I love you. And then she does. And Wilkes runs into this building with some other guy, and Jackson throws McQuade a grenade, and McQuade tosses the grenade at the building, which then explodes to great fanfare.
And David Carradine's Wilkes is a goner.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, it was written into Carradine's contract that he could not be defeated in hand-to-hand combat, which is why he was killed at the end with a grenade.
So you're like, okay, well, I guess they dispatched the bad guys, but now they're like injured and stuck in Mexico. What are they going to do? But this is when Falcone shows up in his helicopter, and he gets off the helicopter, and he's all like, this is great, but I told you to protect my merchandise. And, he looks around, and it's pretty obvious from what we've seen that most of the things have been vaporized and blown up by grenades. So, understandably, he's pretty upset, but he's about to be more upset because they push him and his bodyguard aside, steal his helicopter, and fly off and leave him behind to be taken in by the Mexican police. So they leave Falcone behind to be picked up by the federales, and they I guess, fly back to the States, and the three of them are awarded some pretty serious hardware at another ceremony. Because, if there's one thing that the Rangers know how to do, it's hold a ceremony. And, so they get these awards, and they're all recognized, and this is the point in time when McQuade's ex-wife, or whom we assume is his ex-wife, because he's been macking on some other lady the whole movie, is going to be moving away with their daughter, and she's got a new job, and he's going to help them move. And he's all like, man, I just need a break. I'm on vacation.
And so they have like their car with a U-Haul trailer, and they're all standing outside of this award ceremony that just happened. And McQuade walks up, and he's like, yeah, it'll be great. I'll help you guys move in and everything and get unloaded, because I never get the chance to do this. I always put my job before my family, that kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, his partner, Ramos, pulls up.
What is it, like a hostage situation?
No. They're like, it's a bank robber, and he's like, nah, that's small stuff. I gotta move these guys. He's like, but they've got hostages. And McQuade's like, hostages?
You're moving in yourself, sorry. And he jumps in the car with his partner, and they speed off, leaving his ex-wife and daughter to move into a new house by themselves. And the ex-wife smiles, and she's like, what a man.
J.J. McQuade, you will never change.
That pretty much wraps up the movie, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's the movie.
We'd like to give a shout out to our friend and collaborator, Adam Lawrenson, who has been drawing the amazing Walker illustrations on our social medias. And just check out the one for this special episode with Lone Wolf McQuade. But be sure to check out his other art on Instagram at @ImaginationRunAmok. When we come back, we'll discuss the many parallels of Lone Wolf McQuade to Walker, Texas Ranger, and give our individual Roundhouse rating. So don't go away.
All right, welcome back. So I guess we have to address the elephant in the room, which is that this is a Walker, Texas Ranger podcast, and here we are watching a movie that is not Walker, Texas Ranger. It is the lead starring actor, Chuck Norris, playing a legendary Texas Ranger, but it's not Walker.
Yeah, apparently Chuck Norris credits this film as an inspiration for Walker, Texas Ranger. It was so much of a ripoff of this movie that Steve Carver, the director and producer of this movie, actually sued the production of Walker, Texas Ranger for essentially stealing the whole premise of Walker from Lone Wolf McQuade. And he talks about a little bit about that in the video that we'll have up on our episode page at roundhouseroulette.com if anyone's interested for this podcast episode. Yeah, essentially the whole vibe of McQuade is Walker. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think the vibe might not be the best way.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But his aura, maybe. Everyone knows who he is. Everyone's afraid of him. But he doesn't Walker wouldn't break the rules.
That's true. That's true. But his reputation precedes him.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And there were a lot of actors who in this movie who wound up on Walker, who we already mentioned. L.Q. Jones, he was in the episode Reunion, which you mentioned, Evan, along with R.G. Armstrong. And I'm wondering if that episode is maybe titled after Lone Wolf McQuade. It's kind of a little Lone Wolf reunion. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I think Reunion's all about Texas Rangers getting together. So I have to imagine Armstrong and Jones are both going to play Texas Rangers in that episode as well. So
yeah, and then we got William Sanderson was in 3 Walker episodes, including I think the last 2 episodes, which are a double parter. So maybe they brought in somebody from Lone Wolf to close out the whole series. So normally for the Walker Texas Ranger episodes, we rate them on a scale of 0 to 10 boots to the face. But we're more connoisseurs of the actual TV show Walker Texas Ranger. I myself am not necessarily a Chuck Norris fan. I'm a Walker Texas Ranger fan. So I don't feel right getting too far into the minutia of rating his movies on such a scale as we do the actual TV show itself, which I'm I'm pretty well versed in. I'll say that. Not to brag about my, maybe to brag a little bit.
Really knows a lot. Yeah, okay.
I know a lot about Walker, okay? I know him intimately. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well, anyway, so we're going to rate, going forward, we're going to rate Chuck Norris's movies on a thumbs up or thumbs down. And I've got to give this movie a thumbs up. I enjoyed it. I thought the westernness of it was kind of cool, and the music really set the vibe for me that we're getting like this kind of throwback spaghetti western with a little bit of kung fu flavor. And there were some scenes in it that just weren't necessary, but they were so odd that they were characteristics that kind of added to the film's vibe, and I kind of dug it. The fact that it almost leaned a little bit to James Bond was kind of a plus to me. It was just kind of fun. And obviously, if you're a fan of Chuck Norris and you like to see him do his thing, this is the movie to see. So thumbs up from me.
So for this film, I actually kept track of the stats we would normally keep track of for a normal Walker, Texas Ranger episode. And so in this, we had 5 fights, 4 kicks that could be considered roundhouse kicks. We had 1 car chase, and we had a conservative 11 explosions. I don't know what I was expecting from the film. I guess from what some people say is that Lone Wolf McQuade is like the pre-Walker Texas Ranger, and that Walker is just a continuation of that character, and I don't really see that. This guy is like a beer chugging, murdering explosion machine that has like appears to have no morals whatsoever. His daughter's like getting pushed off a cliff in a car, and he's making out with some random lady. So
yeah, he didn't choose between those two things, though. That's a false equivalency, Evan. Come on.
Tell that to the editor who put those 2 scenes right next to each other. So, I mean, I don't really see this as a Walker, Texas Ranger movie, which is kind of what I was expecting going in. That said, like, the plot was pretty tedious and a little too complicated for its own good. I mean, if I have 2 options, I'll give this a thumbs up because there was some pretty good action. But I will say that I was kind of hoping that this movie would be done in the length of time of a Walker episode. And I think it could be, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think they could have split the difference maybe on the length. That was my big complaint. Once they got to the part where the truck was buried, and don't get me wrong, at that point, the movie got way better. Yeah, I'm going to go thumbs up too.
All thumbs on deck for this one. So if you're a Chuck Norris fan, you got to watch this one.
If you're a Walker, Texas Ranger fan, you got to watch this one. Actually, if you're a Walker, Texas Ranger fan, you've probably already seen this, and you should tell us about it.
Yeah, and you can just troll us. And honestly, this is my first viewing of this movie. I'm not a movie guy. I'm not a TV guy. One of my friends told me, he's like, Adam, you're not a movie guy. You're a music guy, and that's okay, man. But I'm trying to remedy that here. I may not be a TV guy. I may not be a movie guy, but I'll tell you one thing. I'm a goddamn Walker, Texas Ranger guy. Okay. That's my exception to the rule. That's the prism with which I look through life, is Walker, Texas Ranger.
Okay.
That gives this episode 3 thumbs up. We can all agree that most cars should come with a supercharger switch standard.
Most definitely.
But please do let us know what you think on social media or by emailing us at roundusroulette@gmail.com. We hope you'll join us next week when we get back to our regular format and do the thing that we love most, which is reviewing Walker, Texas Ranger episodes. Please share your opinions with us on Facebook and on Instagram at @RoundhouseRoulette and on Twitter at @RoundhousePod. And please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your fine podcasts. Thanks for listening, and until next week, may the eyes of the Ranger be upon you.
When you're in Texas, look behind you. Oh, 'cause that's where the Ranger's gonna be.